Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a really fascinating journey into a stack of sources that fundamentally challenge the usual definition of business success.
Yeah, the standard playbook.
Exactly. You might think big is always better in business, right? But our mission today is to unpack a profoundly different perspective. We're looking at how some companies have blazed their own path, achieving extraordinary things by explicitly choosing not to chase endless growth, and instead focusing on something more profound, something they call mojo.
Right. It's a deep dive into what truly makes a business great. And it often defies, conventional wisdom and just looking at the financial metrics.
Okay.
We'll explore the unique criteria used to identify these organizations, the very personal choices their leaders made, and the incredible payoffs, not just money, but deeply personal communal payoffs that came from taking these less traveled paths.
Okay, let's dig into this then. Our sources introduce us to this concept of small giants, businesses singled out for really extraordinary achievements. But there's a twist. It's not just about being small, like a typical mom and pop shop. This is a deliberate choice. Often goes against the grain.
And what's fascinating here is how they define scale. The relevant measure isn't annual revenue, which, let's face it, is what most businesses obsess over.
Totally.
It's surprisingly the number of employees. These companies consciously operate at what they call a human scale.
Human scale. Okay.
Yeah, where it's still possible for people to actually know everyone, for the CEO maybe to meet new hires personally, where employees feel genuinely connected, and this isn't an accident. Operating at this specific scale is central to their whole approach. It's almost like a strategic advantage for them.
And the author wasn't just looking for businesses that happened to stay small, right?
Right.
They were actively looking for companies that defied conventional wisdom. Companies that had chances for huge growth but consciously chose, nope, different path. We're talking about companies like Acre Brewing, the original American microbrewery in San Francisco. Citus Storage Inc., a big independent record storage business in Brooklyn. Cliff Bar & Co., making energy bars. EC-Up, backup alarms. Hammerhead Productions, doing special effects for movies.
So they're all over the map, industry-wise.
Yeah, but they share this core philosophy.
Exactly. And a crucial yet often hard to pin down quality these companies share is what the sources call mojo.
Mojo, okay.
It's described as like something about the brand, product, and way of being in the world that was different. And the sources strongly suggest that just chasing growth, unchecked growth, can often lead to losing this mojo.
How so?
By compromising core things like creativity or that emotional connection you have with customers, authenticity, quality, your ties to the community, or just the internal culture itself. Often it's about growing too big too fast.
Right.
Which raises a huge question for any entrepreneur, really. If growth can mess with your core values, your very essence, well, what then?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because so many entrepreneurs just assume that selling the business or going public, that's the ultimate goal. It's inevitable.
It's seen as the pinnacle, yeah.
But our sources highlight this really powerful, almost liberating choice. Saying no to that path to preserve what actually matters. And often, this big realization only comes after some kind of major crisis, a moment where they're really facing losing everything.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see these powerful examples, like Norm Brodsky of Citus Storage. He chased what he called a $100 million mirage, this huge, ambitious target, and it led to bankruptcy.
Wow.
He talks really vividly about missing his eldest daughter's childhood, realizing he'd let pure ambition just override what was most important to him personally. And that painful experience, it taught him that a highly profitable, say, $10 million company was way better, far more fulfilling than some $100 million company that was losing money.
Makes sense when you put it like that.
And that lesson really stuck. He later advised another entrepreneur, Nick Cirillo, on the basics, saying, sales are nice, profits are nicer, but you live or die on cash flow. It's about survival, sure, but also about purpose.
And Norm Brodsky wasn't alone in hitting that kind of turning point. You've got Jay Goltz of Artists Frame Service. He described himself as a biz kid, always pushing for more growth, more expansion. He hit what he called rock bottom. Financial stress, personal issues, struggling to sleep, family illness, the works.
Sounds tough.
But then this profound revelation came from an employee, Lily Booker. She just thanked him for giving her a job in her 50s.
Wow. Simple, but powerful.
Totally. And suddenly he realized he wasn't a failure, that his business had a real positive impact on people's lives. What do you think that moment really did for him? Did it just reframe success, or did it change how he ran things?
Oh, that's a great question, because it seems like it fundamentally changed how he operated. It shifted his focus away from just relentless outward growth towards becoming more of an internal manager, focusing on building solid systems, regaining control. He learned to, as he put it, let people off the hook for mistakes, understanding that difference between a genuine error and just carelessness. He actually describes going from like 75% entrepreneur, 25% manager to the complete reverse.
Interesting switch.
Yeah, it became about creating an internal environment that really nurtured the people and the quality, rather than just chasing external numbers.
And that desire to protect the internal mojo, that's a theme, isn't it? Gary Erickson of Cliff Bar, another fascinating case.
Absolutely.
He struggled for 2 whole years to buy out his partner. Why? To stop the company from being sold for $120 million.
That's a huge amount to walk away from, potentially.
Right. He was just utterly convinced that bringing in outside capital would mean there's no turning back, that their mojo, that authentic emotional connection they had with consumers, would just be lost.
He fought for it.
He did, and he won. He prioritized keeping that connection, believing the sales would follow, and they did. He said he'd be very unhappy today if he hadn't made that choice.
It's incredible the lengths some founders go to just to preserve that core identity. Bill Butler of Butler Inc., for instance.
What did he do?
He intentionally cut back sales when growth started straining his infrastructure and stressing out his employees. He actually reduced revenue to stay around 125 employees.
Just so he could know everyone?
Pretty much, yeah. So he could genuinely know everyone. And similarly, Robert Catlin of Signature Mortgage, he resisted all this pressure to expand nationally. People apparently called him crazy.
Why resist?
Because he prioritized control, freedom, and his family time over just getting bigger. These aren't just spreadsheets and forecasts. They're deeply personal life choices.
And then there's Annie DeFranco of Righteous Babe Records. Famously turned down tons of major record labels to build her own company.
Yeah, the indie icon.
She explicitly said she didn't want to be part of some giant corporation, even if it meant releasing music that would just break even sometimes. Her commitment with Scott Fisher was about serving the art, not just maximizing profit.
That takes guts.
Doesn't it? Even a hairdresser named Salima refused to expand beyond 1 employee. She preferred serving a select group of clients she actually liked, prioritizing that sense of accomplishment over becoming, as she put it, a manufacturing empire.
A manufacturing empire. I like that phrase.
It's almost like they see growth beyond a certain point as, I don't know, a loss of identity?
Absolutely. Salima believed the moment a business becomes that manufacturing empire, it's not a person anymore. And this collective realization, or this choice from all these leaders, it really shifts the focus. From external validation, what the market thinks, to internal fulfillment. It shows this profound courage to define success on their own terms instead of just following the path everyone else says you should.
Okay, so we spent a lot of time on the why these companies chose this different path, often after some painful realization. Now let's pivot a bit to the how.
Right.
Once they made that choice, how did they actually build this unique mojo? What does that look like day to day?
Our sources point to a really consistent focus, fostering deep, multifaceted intimacy. Intimacy, okay.
Yeah, intimacy with their communities, with their customers, and crucially, with their employees.
Okay, let's break that down. First, intimacy with community. These companies aren't just located somewhere. They are deeply rooted, often synonymous with their locations.
Like Zingerman's in Ann Arbor.
Exactly. Zingerman's is Ann Arbor to its core. Anchor Brewing is a San Francisco institution. City Storage was Brooklyn through and through. Righteous Babe reflects Buffalo's sort of scrappy outsider ethos, even drawing strength from it. Locals talked about a sense of uplift when they renovated an old church there.
That's cool.
Jay Goltz's Artists Frame service was actually credited with helping spur the revival of Chicago's North Clybourne area. You even see companies like City Storage building these close ties in Williamsburg. Instead of a big annual party, they let employees decide where to give charitable donations.
That empowers the employees, too.
Totally. Or Cliff Bar's 2080 program, where they actually pay employees to volunteer for causes they choose.
It's incredible how many of these stories hinge on this deep local bond. It almost feels like the community becomes, an unofficial stakeholder, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's not just about philanthropy write-offs. It feels like genuine integration. And like the sources point out, often they do it because it's the right thing to do, which feels so much more authentic than some blatant marketing ploy.
Right.
And this connection, it isn't just a nice to have. It can literally save a company. We see that with Nick's Pizza and Pub.
The pizza story.
Yeah. They survived this brush with bankruptcy because the community just rallied. People bought pizzas like crazy, contacted his bank to offer support. The phones apparently started ringing within 5 minutes of him asking for help.
That's just a powerful demonstration of that community bond right there. Okay, so next, let's explore intimacy with customers and suppliers.
Okay.
It's about forging a real emotional connection, not just, transactional relationships. Danny Meyer of Union Square Hospitality talks about enlightened hospitality.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, preventing his restaurants from losing their soul. He recognized that customers actually want intimacy with the restaurant itself, the place, the feeling, even if not necessarily with him personally.
Interesting distinction.
Or think about Cita Storage again. Norm Brodsky and his wife Elaine sent personal handwritten letters to new customers, invited them to 4th of July parties. They even named warehouse aisles after customer companies with, great fanfare.
That's a personal touch.
And eCeco, the backup alarm maker, they went through big internal changes just to become what they called customer intimate, providing products for multiple needs, lower cost, all driven by this passion for really understanding and getting close to their clients.
And this extends to suppliers, too, you mentioned.
Oh, powerfully. Zingerman's, for example, is like a showcase for its suppliers. They highlight their stories in newsletters, tastings like Ben and Blair Ripple, who supply their Balinese sea salt, or the Ojibwa tribe that provides wild rice harvested from lakes.
It creates this whole ecosystem of connection, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And finally, and you could argue this is the most critical piece, intimacy with employees.
The core.
This is the absolute core of Mojo. The sources make it crystal clear. Unless employees feel valued, appreciated, supported, empowered, and crucially, see a genuine future with chances to learn and grow, then Mojo is simply not in the cards.
So employee experience is paramount.
Totally. Look at Real Precision Manufacturing. They had this incredibly deep commitment to job security, which actually came from their founders' own negative experiences working at 3M. But that commitment later presented them with this excruciating dilemma about layoffs when times got tough.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What kind of internal culture allows for that level of loyalty, that commitment? Cita Storage, again, went above and beyond with benefits.
Like the 401k.
Yeah, they contributed an astonishing $1.30 for every dollar an employee invested, plus education reimbursement, even bringing in grief counselors after 9/11.
That's serious support.
And Norm Brodsky noticed service compliments just soared. He got more praise in 6 months than in the previous 14 years.
Wow.
And Nick's Pizza and Pub, they boast this incredibly low employee turnover rate, under 25%, in an industry where 150% is considered normal.
That's unheard of, especially with young staff.
Right. Their high school-aged employees take on significant responsibility because they have this elaborate training program and a culture that makes them say things like, I don't feel like I'm coming to work.
That says it all. Even Jay Goltz, despite describing himself as kind of hard-nosed, created this really intimate and vibrant culture at Artists Frame Service.
How did he manage that?
Employees saw him as a teacher, someone who fostered quality and empowered them, viewing mistakes as teaching moments, not reasons for punishment. It just shows there are different ways to build that internal employee devotion.
It's not one size fits all.
Exactly. And Real also exemplifies this deep trust. There was this instance where employees debated the ethics of making hinges for a cigarette company. Management actually trusted them to debate it and do the right thing for the company's values. That's huge trust.
It is. These businesses are consciously creating these internal little worlds with their own rules, their own values. It's not just a side effect of doing business. It's a core part of their identity. Now, okay, building a small giant, it sounds great, very values-driven, but it isn't about ignoring the financial realities.
Not at all.
As Jay Goltz puts it, profits are not optional in business. If you don't have them, you're dangerously close to going broke.
Can't argue with that.
And Norm Brodsky, as we heard, reminded us, sales are nice, profits are nicer, but you live or die on cash flow. So it sounds like these small giants are basically telling us to toss out the old MBA playbook, or at least scribble some really important notes in the margins.
Precisely. It's definitely not about ignoring profitability, far from it. It's more about how you define profit and maybe what that profit is for.
What do you mean?
It's almost like they're building businesses designed to help their founders and their employees sleep better at night, not just grow infinitely bigger on paper. But this intentionality, it brings its own unique set of challenges. It's not all smooth sailing.
Like what?
Well, Real, for instance, they struggled with this low-margin laptop hinge business. They eventually had to shift away because it just couldn't cover the costs of innovation, and innovation was essential to their whole model.
So values clashed with market reality there.
In a way, yeah. Then there's the really poignant story of Rhythm and Hughes, Academy Award-winning visual effects company, top of their game creatively.
Right.
But despite that excellence, they earned a little to no profit because of intense industry changes, price pressure, and their commitment to providing excellent health coverage for their staff. Ultimately, it led to the company being sold.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. And its founder, John Hughes, later reflected that maybe he should have done layoffs earlier to try and preserve the core company rather than losing it entirely. It's a tough balancing act.
That's a really tough lesson.
Yeah.
And then there's this other long-term challenge, succession.
Yes.
The end game. Most founders, they want their businesses to outlive them, but they struggle immensely with how to make that happen, especially when their own identity is so wrapped up in the company. Danny Meyer from Union Square Hospitality even admitted, count me amongst the unenlightened when it comes to that.
And he's not alone. This is a huge challenge. Just look at family business survival rate statistics say only about 30% make it through the second generation.
Wow, that low.
Yeah. Eco, the backup alarm company, was eventually sold. And look, while it did help them avoid deeper layoffs during a recession, it perfectly illustrates how hard it is to maintain that independence when the founder steps away.
But it's not impossible.
Not impossible. Anchor Brewing, for example, successfully navigated its succession. Fritz Maytag, the previous owner, was apparently painstaking in seeking out buyers.
What was he looking for?
Buyers who would genuinely commit to retaining the employees and maintaining that mojo, that special culture. And they did. The new owners even managed to double beer volume while keeping the brewery rooted in San Francisco.
So it can be done.
It shows that careful planning, and maybe more importantly, aligning with the right buyers who share those values, can actually preserve a company's unique character. But it takes immense foresight and probably a bit of luck, too.
So if you're listening to this, maybe you're an entrepreneur thinking about it, you might be asking, can I actually do this?
Mm-hmm.
What we've seen from these deep dives is that there is a choice. There's a choice beyond just endless growth, and it's a really profound one. These companies aren't just, economic entities. They're expressions of their founders' deepest values and passions.
Bernard Goldhirsch, who founded Inc. magazine, really captured this well. He saw the entrepreneur as an artist, basically, with business as their ultimate means of expression.
An artist.
Yeah, creating a business from nothing, just a blank canvas. He thought it was amazing what entrepreneurs do, creating this living company from just an idea, maybe start in a garage. And the payoff, it's not just financial. It can affect every single aspect of your professional and personal life, your relationships, your control over your own time and destiny, and the real impact you have on the world around you.
So what really stands out to you from today's deep dive into these small giants?
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's this idea that true success isn't always measured by size, by scale, but by this unique mojo.
Yeah.
Forged through that deep intimacy, community, customers, employees. It's genuinely thought-provoking.
It really is. It makes you wonder, if more business leaders started prioritizing control, culture, and connection over just infinite scale, what kind of world could we actually be building? Not just for the employees and customers, but for the communities they live in. Could focusing on this human scale actually be the ultimate, maybe the most sustainable form of innovation going forward?